Protection isn't luck, it's alignment. Too many people look at survival and call it coincidence. They look at how someone avoided danger, escaped harm, or walked away untouched and say, "You're just fortunate." But that's surface-level thinking. Luck is random. Alignment is intentional. Alignment is what happens when your values, your decisions, your spirit, and your direction are all moving in the same lane. When you are aligned, you're not just reacting to life, you're positioned correctly within it. Alignment changes what has access to you. Not everything can reach a person who is walking in truth. Not every door opens, not every voice gets through. Not every opportunity feels right, even if it looks good on paper. When you're aligned, you feel resistance before destruction. You sense discomfort before disaster. You hesitate before harm. That hesitation isn't weakness, it's awareness. It's the internal signal that says, this doesn't belong in your future. People who are aligned don't chase everything. They don't need constant validation. They don't move out of desperation, and that alone blocks a lot of evil. Manipulation feeds on insecurity. Deception feeds on urgency. When you're aligned, you're not in a rush to prove anything, so traps lose their power. The wrong people get uncomfortable around you because you're not vibrating at the frequency they need to control you. Alignment also means your losses are strategic. Things fall away not to punish you, but to protect you. You may not understand why a relationship ended or why an opportunity disappeared, but alignment sees further than emotion. It sees outcomes. It removes what looks good now, but would cost you later. That's not chaos. That's precision. When you're aligned, protection doesn't always feel dramatic. Sometimes it feels quiet. Sometimes it feels like a missed call, a delayed plan, an unanswered message, or a sudden change of heart. But those small shifts redirect entire outcomes. You don't need to see the danger to be spared from it. You just need to be positioned where it can't reach you. That's why protection isn't about being hidden from life. It's about being placed correctly within it. When your inner world is aligned, your external world adjusts. Not because you're lucky, but because you're walking in a direction that naturally repels what's meant to harm you. Not every battle is yours to fight, some are divinely blocked. That idea alone can change how you move through life. Too many people exhaust themselves trying to confront every threat, correct every lie, and defend themselves against every attack. They think strength means constant engagement, but real protection often looks like dissipation. It looks like walking away untouched while chaos burns behind you. There are moments when something should have escalated but didn't. Situations that had all the ingredients for damage, yet somehow lost momentum. Conflicts that never reached your doorstep. Words that were spoken behind your back but never shaped your future. That's not because the threat wasn't real. It's because the outcome was already decided in your favor. Some battles are stopped before they ever become visible. Divine blocking works quietly. It reroutes people. It delays plans. It causes confusion among those with harmful intentions. You don't always see the resistance working on your behalf, but that doesn't mean it isn't happening. In fact, the most effective protection rarely announces itself. If you had to fight every enemy directly, you'd be drained, bitter, and distracted from your purpose. So instead, some battles are removed from your path entirely. This kind of protection requires trust. Trust that silence is sometimes stronger than response. Trust that you don't need to explain yourself to everyone who misunderstands you. Trust that not being invited, not being included, or not being chosen can actually be the shield. When you're protected, you don't win by overpowering others. You win by not being pulled into spaces that would cost you your peace. There's also a lesson in restraint here. Just because you could fight doesn't mean you should. Energy is currency. Where you spend it determines what grows in your life. When certain battles disappear, it's an invitation to focus forward instead of sideways. To build instead of defend. To become instead of prove. Evil thrives on reaction. It wants attention, emotional investment, and access to your inner world. When a battle is divinely blocked, that access is denied. You stay intact, your clarity stays sharp, Your momentum continues. What was meant to slow you down never even gets a chance. Understanding this changes how you interpret obstacles. Not everything that looks like avoidance is fear. Sometimes it's wisdom guiding you around a fight you were never meant to endure. Sometimes the strongest move is letting the door stay closed and continuing to walk forward, knowing that what didn't reach you was never allowed to. Your discernment is stronger than manipulation. That's not something you learned from books or conversations alone. It was built through awareness, experience, and an inner connection that refuses to ignore subtle signals. Manipulation depends on distraction. It needs you to doubt yourself, rush your decisions, or silence your intuition. Discernment does the opposite. It slows you down, it sharpens your focus. It makes you ask questions before you commit energy, time, or trust. There are moments when everything looks right on the surface, yet something inside you resists. No clear reason, no obvious red flag, just a quiet sense that says, "Pay attention." That voice isn't irrational. It's protective. Discernment doesn't scream, it whispers, and people who are protected learn to listen before the damage is visible. That's why they avoid traps others fall into willingly. Manipulative people rely on patterns. They use charm, urgency, guilt, or flattery to bypass your boundaries. But discernment recognizes patterns before they repeat. It notices inconsistencies in words and actions. It senses when energy doesn't match intention. When you're discerning, you don't need proof to pause. You trust yourself enough to step back without explaining. That alone dismantles manipulation because control only works when you cooperate with it. Discernment also protects your emotional world. It keeps you from overextending, oversharing, and overcommitting. You become selective, not because you're closed off, but because you value clarity. You stop giving access to people who haven't earned it. You stop negotiating with discomfort. That selectiveness isn't arrogance, it's self-respect refined by awareness. What's powerful is that discernment strengthens with use. Every time you honor it, it gets clearer. Every time you ignore it, the lesson gets louder. Protected people learn faster because they pay attention sooner. They don't wait for devastation to confirm a feeling. They trust the signal before the evidence arrives. In a world full of noise, discernment is your internal compass. It keeps you from being steered by pressure or persuasion. When manipulation meets discernment, it loses its leverage. The games don't work. The hooks don't land, and without access to your mind or emotions, harmful intentions dissolve on their own. Resistance doesn't mean rejection, it often means redirection. One of the hardest lessons to accept is that not everything that blocks you is working against you. When you're protected, resistance shows up as friction, delay, or sudden discomfort, not to stop your growth, but to steer it. What feels like denial in the moment is often guidance correcting your course before you reach something that would cost you more than it gives. Redirection is subtle. It doesn't always come with clarity or closure. Sometimes it's a plan that falls apart at the last minute. Sometimes it's a door that closes right when you were sure it would open. Your ego wants answers immediately, but protection doesn't operate on your timeline. It operates on outcomes. It sees consequences you can't see yet and intervenes before you're emotionally or spiritually invested too deeply. Resistance forces you to slow down and reassess. It creates space between impulse and action. In that space, awareness grows. You start asking better questions. You notice what you were willing to tolerate just to move forward. You recognize where you were about to compromise yourself for convenience or validation. Redirection exposes misalignment before it becomes regret. People often misinterpret resistance as a sign to push harder, but protected people learn when to pause. They understand that effort without alignment leads to exhaustion. Just because you want something doesn't mean it wants you in the same way. Redirection saves you from chasing what would eventually drain you, distract you, or diminish you. There's also humility in redirection. It reminds you that you don't see the full picture, that something greater is shaping your path with precision, not punishment. What you're being moved away from may look good, familiar, or exciting, but it may not be safe for who you're becoming. Resistance becomes the boundary you didn't know you needed. Over time, you realize that every redirection carried wisdom, each delay preserved your peace, each closed door refined your direction. What once felt like rejection reveals itself as protection, guiding you toward spaces where your growth is supported, your energy is respected, and your future isn't compromised.